Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. I'm going to hit you with a little bit of word salad. We're going to look at an article out of the Journal of Nature, specifically a subjournal, Nature Metabolism, and it's called Systemic Adaptations to Extreme Caloric Restrictions of Different Durations in Humans. So what the heck does that mean? Well, ultimately, we're going to teach you how to hack a 7-day fast in 24 hours with some simple lifestyle changes. But this article goes into really cool outcomes of a group of folks. Small group, 12 people, 5 men, 7 women, and it's going to look at what changes happened in the proteins in your body and your blood plasma as you go through a 7-day fast. So excited to get into it today. This is a question we get often is, should I do a 7-day fast? Yeah, I like to do one to 2 times a year. And this deep dive we're going to do today is really going to show you where the magic happens and how to optimize the process for you. And then ultimately, how to adapt this into your day-to-day fasting lifestyle. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome in. Head back to episode 0, episode 1, give it a listen. It's Tommy and I's stories on how fasting has transformed our lives and why we do what we do week in and week out, why we have the resources on the website, why we do the challenges and have coaching. Because fasting absolutely transformed our lives and now thousands of others on this journey. So if you're a long-term listener, you're an OG. Thanks for all of the downloads, the rates, the reviews, the shares. Thank you for being on this journey with us. We love to hear from you. Just gave a shout out to John the other day, who gave us a 1 or 2 year update on his transformation with fasting. And this is ultimately, you guys are why we do it. We're grateful for all the messages that you send us, all the questions you submit, and just happy and grateful that we can be on this journey with you. So what we're going to dive into today, Tommy, is, a 7-day water fast triggers a systemic shift that really becomes much more obvious after about day 3. Not just a simple eat less, weigh less type story, right? Because most people come to fasting for weight loss.
Sure.
So the nuance here is that there's a couple of things that take place at certain times, and then we're going to talk about this fear that's out there around, I'm going to lose lean muscle tissue. Right? So, what happens during this? And then what's the ultimate outcome of a 7-day fast? And do you actually keep the weight off that you lost during that 7 days? And what happened to your body composition during the process?
Wow. So when we're looking at the results from that 7-day fast, we go there's a lot of different really cool processes that actually kick in. What are they? How much are they kicking in? What are they doing for us? Why should I care? Are they all based around my fat loss goals, my weight goals? And the answer is no, they are absolutely not. They go well beyond that. Yep. In fact, I would argue that they probably do a much better job at the other things than just moving the scale, at least in the long term. And so what's going on? To what extent are these things happening? And then is there any way to get some of these benefits without necessarily doing a 7-day fast? That would be great if I could kind of, supercharge my fasting efforts, right?
Yeah, because you could Angus Barbieri it, right? And just do, whatever it was, 372 days of fasting, or I always forget the numbers, 384.
Yeah.
The longest recorded medical supervised fast, the guy lost a tremendous amount, 270 something pounds, and he was morbidly obese, pretty much on his deathbed. And,
right.
You could do that, but that's not sustainable nor recommended by any means. So it's how do we take some of these principles on what's going on physiologically and apply them into a consistent foundational fasting lifestyle? So what the study was looking at was the plasma proteomic response. And what that means is it refers to the changes in the protein composition of your blood plasma in reaction to various physiological or pathological conditions. So the whole idea of the study was to provide insights into disease mechanisms, immune responses, and overall health status or metabolic health, right? So it was cool to see some of the things that came out of this. And this came from Nick Norwitz. I'm part of his Substack, and I was like, man, this is a really cool kind of framework on answering the question of, should I do a longer, 5 to 7 day fast? And Walter Longo's research is out there. I always tell my story. I like to do a couple of these a year because I just feel better. It's kind of like a reset, mental and physical reset for me. Mm-hmm. But, in essence, feast and famine's been around for a long time. We now pretty much live in a world of feast, obesogenic, food noise filled, convenient DoorDash, ultra refined processed food world that we live in. But fasting is been practiced by billions of people over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years.
Right.
So when we look at this, what happens when you fast for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 7 days? What changes happen across your metabolism and your different organ systems? Because we have a lot of N=1 stories and studies, our own personal stories too, of, hey, I started fasting and this went away. Kieran, one of our rockstar coaches, her mom and her RA. My dad and his 30 years of diabetes and 120 units of insulin, gone. My asthma and allergies. Tommy, your was it sleep apnea?
Yep, borderline sleep apnea.
Borderline sleep apnea.
Low T, which affected everything. Low T. Yep.
My liver enzymes, my triglyceride levels. So can we optimize our fasting lifestyle on a day-to-day basis using the principles that they found in this really cool Hallmark study?
Yeah.
So
go ahead. I just there's so many benefits of a longer fast, but usually we hear them spoken about just with regards to just trying to get the scale to move. But the underlying benefits are so big, but a lot of times they're not necessarily quantified in a really rigorous way. And if they are, they don't typically go out to this time frame, which you and I both love, 5 to 7 day fast on a once, twice, 3 times in a year kind of cadence over the past few years, and I continue to do that. But so it's really great to see a kind of just diving into the details, the really like biochemical details of what's going on here.
So what was the study? So it was a study, 2024 study, Journal of Nature Metabolism, right? Pretty straightforward study. And that's what really makes it valuable, and Nick speaks to this, is 12 healthy volunteers, 7-day water fast. No food, no caloric beverages, just water for an entire week. Now, here's one of the notes I want to make about this fear of lean muscle loss. Is this were in healthy individuals with an average starting BMI of 25. So we're not talking about the 50, 80-pound weight loss group. We're talking about healthy individuals that have healthy blood labs. So not me, where I was starting my fasting lifestyle journey with elevated liver enzymes and blood pressure creeping up and triglycerides that were off and, visceral fat around the midsection. And they removed any really lean individuals as well. So all 12 participants completed the study. So that's a shout out, right? And throughout the 7-day fast, there was also a 3-day refeeding period. They drew blood samples, but they didn't just measure the usual like glucose, insulin, ketones. This is where they deployed a high throughput proteomic platform capable of measuring 2,923 circulating proteins simultaneously.
Wow.
Really cool, right?
Yeah.
Above my pay grade to fully understand what that means. Our basic understanding of, hey, they were measuring, again, the blood reaction to various physiological or pathological conditions. So disease mechanisms, immune responses, and again, that overall health status. So the first thing, this fear of muscle loss, right? I get my DEXA done minimum once a year, usually twice a year. Get my BMR, RMR done as well. And I have not lost any lean muscle tissue throughout this process. Periods of weightlifting and resistance training and not resistance training.
Okay.
right? That lean
Awesome.
mass has always been maintained. The growth hormone spike, the response, that short-term response of growth hormone protect the lean muscle tissue. But here's what happened in this study. Over the 7-day fast, they lost 12 and a half pounds.
Okay.
And looking at the raw numbers, a proportion of that seemed to be lean muscle tissue.
Okay.
But here's the caveat. So the tech that we use to measure the lean mass aren't necessarily measuring just muscle. They're doing liver, organs, water content, and glycogen. So if any of you have ever done an extended fast or gone low carb, you know that you get the whoosh, right? All the water comes off.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it's not a true representation of lean mass or skeletal muscle loss. And the kicker was in day 8, 9, and 10, during the refeeding period, they regained over 95% of that lean mass, air quotes, back. So in my head, I'm like, well, they could have never actually lost it. But here's the important thing. The loss in fat mass was sustained.
Yep.
So this is why we say when you do longer fast, or say you come out of one of our challenges, whenever I do a longer fast, 3+ days, 5+ days, 7+ days, I know that I'm expecting that scale to go up about 40 to 50% of what I lost during the process.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
But even though the measured lean mass decreased during the week-long fast, much of that either wasn't muscle to begin with or it rebounded very quickly. But here's the kicker. The fat that was lost stayed lost.
Yeah. And that makes perfect sense because we burn through the fat as an energy source during the fast. But the other changes that show up as non-fat tissue decrease in mass and in weight, in volume, is essentially because we've taken all of those cells and shrunk them down. So it's not a decrease in the number of cells or anything else like that, but you're moving around. Your water buckets are essentially changing during that fast. That big whoosh, all that water has to come from somewhere. It's not just sitting in some compartment in your body somewhere, just away from the other cells. It's mostly sitting in muscular cells. Actually,
Yep.
that's one of your largest sinks for water in your whole body. So it's if you've ever done an extended fast, like you don't feel different. You don't feel weaker. You can exercise all throughout that time. It's really good to be able to see what's going on within the body. And we did an early episode actually explaining some of this because this is one of the biggest kind of mental hurdles that people will have to jump over whenever they start fasting, especially if you've done a lot of resistance training, if you've spent a lot of time working out and thinking about your musculature, is but I don't want to erase any of my gains. I don't want to mess with any of my hard work, right? And I don't want to have a negative effect on my body composition. So we don't have to worry about that. And like you mentioned, the growth hormone protective effect is enough to counteract that. So it's a really good thing. And I would have loved to see if these participants, what they were doing activity wise, but they kept the activity just do whatever you normally do.
Baseline ADLs, really. Yeah.
We're not measuring that. And so you just go about your regular day. We're not going to confound the results with any additional activity or anything else like that. So that's fine.
So here's what happens day 1 through 2. This is where your body clears out. It's the fuel switch, right? It burns through your glycogen stores. You're going to switch into fat burning mode, increase your ketone production. And what they realize here is the proteins involved. So when they're measuring these proteins, about 1/3 of the proteins overall that they were measuring change, which is really cool. The proteins initially that changed in day 1 and 2 were involved in fat transport, fatty acid metabolism, and ketone production, right? That's pretty much basic fasting 101. But there was something that really, that happened really cool in this time period in response to one of the proteins that they measured, and LDL cholesterol. And it's PCSK9. It's an inhibitor class of cholesterol-lowering drugs included in Repatha, right, which is one of the brand names. So that protein promotes the breakdown of LDL receptors in the liver. LDL receptors are responsible for clearing LDL particles from the bloodstream, right? So when you do that, you're going to have higher circulating LDL cholesterol and ApoB levels. The PCSK9 inhibitors block that process, so your body can better process the LDL, this fear in the medical system of LDL cholesterol being directly related to cardiovascular disease, which we now know it's not, as a standalone lab metric. So what happened is fasting reduced those levels, and it started within this first 1 to 2 day time frame, this first 48 hours. So it reduced the protein, thereby increasing your body's ability to handle the LDL particle. And what ended up happening was it's going to increase that capacity to handle that lipid traffic, like that cholesterol traffic that's floating around. And ultimately, you're going to see a drop in your LDL numbers, your body's ability to process cholesterol and fat burning more efficiently, which is incredible.
Wow.
So it's telling your body like, hey, burn fat now, burn fat now, burn fat now. And that's why this 36 to 48 hour fast is a powerful tool to have in your fasting lifestyle tool belt.
100%. And it makes sense because without any stored carbohydrate, glycogen stores anymore, because we can only store about 20 to 30 hours, depending on the size of your frame, your musculature, all that stuff. But after those are burned through, we need to be biochemically in fat burning mode. And so, and the transition from one to the other is oftentimes where we see the toughest time during our fast. And it's going to be based on how much did I eat? What did I eat during my last meal? Because then once you're done burning through that and through your stored glycogen stores, then that's also determining how extreme of a switch is it going to be for my metabolism to go from the carbohydrate based glycolytic pathway of metabolism over into a state of I'm in a ketogenic state. I'm in a state of ketosis, and now I'm being able to tap into the long-term fat stores. So if you've ever felt like that transition and it's been kind of tough, that's a good time to supplement with some electrolytes. That's a good time to bring in some additional salt. And when you do that, that helps to kind of smooth that transition time until you're fully in fat burning mode.
Yeah, and then day 2 through 5, it's really cool what happens. This is where like the deep remodeling begins. So there was a massive second wave of protein changes that went far beyond just that first kind of energy switch from sugar burner to fat burner ketone production stage. It really in the first couple of days was changing kind of what the body burns, the fuel source, stored fat versus short-term energy or glucose that you're ingesting with food. But day 3 is like when the renovation crew shows up and the rewiring starts to begin.
Nice.
And this is where they saw the proteins activate related to the immune system, inflammation, the brain, and your actual blood chemistry, your cellular stress response, cardiovascular disease. All of these things started to change. 1,000 of the close to 3,000, just over 1,000 of the proteins changed significantly over the 7-day fast, and the majority of them didn't really begin to shift until day 3, which we're going to talk about and what Nick mentions as the day 3 threshold. We'll come back to that in a minute. The day 5 through 7, this is where you've got a new framework. This is where you really have a new metabolic infrastructure that starts to be set in stone. It's really going to be where those changes that were happening is going to come back to balance. So the body didn't panic. It didn't freak out. It didn't shut down. It settled into a reconfigured metabolic state, fundamentally different from the original baseline from where we started. So a lot of these later stage changes mapped onto proteins and pathways for longevity, neuroprotection, reduced risk of cardiovascular disease and autoimmune diseases, which is where we started the conversation, highlighting some of those N=1 case studies that we hear from people and friends and family and listeners and challengers and coaching clients of like, holy crap, my RA has completely been in remission for years. I'm no longer on diabetes medications. I don't have brain fog, or my memory loss that I was experiencing has improved. So day 5 through 7 is where we saw longevity, neuroprotection, and reduced risk of cardiovascular and autoimmune diseases. Those proteins associated with those plasma proteins, really start to ramp up. So that's 1/3 of all of the proteins that were measured changed significantly in this 5 to 7 day time period. So day 3 threshold, and then we're going to talk about the refeeding and then the practical takeaways on how to really apply some of these protein changes into, let's say, a standard fasting lifestyle of a 18 to 22 hour, 24-hour OMAD type fasting lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. When you look at the acceleration of the change too, we didn't have enough time to see where a lot of these processes stopped. Also, there's potential. It's like a story with a cliffhanger here, because a lot of these things were still changing all the way up through day 7, and would have potentially continued to either drop if they needed to drop, or continue to accelerate, or continue to rise if that was the trajectory. So a lot of these didn't just plateau at day 7; they just broke the fast, and then they ended up reverting towards the mean, or coming back into the normal physiological range. So it's really interesting. So if you have a minute to kind of go through and actually take a look at the graphics of this article, it can be really interesting and encouraging to see, hey, I'm doing a longer fast. There's reasons. There's a lot of good stuff going on, because we've talked to a lot of folks who've done 10 and 15 and 30-day fasts and things like that, which are incredible and oftentimes sound very unrealistic, or, oh my gosh, I could never do that.
And or not required.
Yeah, not required, sure. But then at the same time, it's like, if you're not necessarily going for movement on the scale, or just movement on the scale, but if you have other reasons why you want to do these things, these can be powerful motivators, and helping you to understand what's happening. Because are things going on under the surface, or am I just the weirdo who's not eating for extended period of time?
Right. And so this day 3 threshold really does matter. The body shifts from simply changing fuel sources to like actively renovating itself. And unequivocally, we are in the camp that fasting has other benefits than moving the scale. Right?
Oh yeah,
And that's what
1000%.
we do week in and week out. So typically the studies, a lot of the stuff we'll do is a small number of biomarkers. Most fasting interventions are less than 48 hours, modified ADF, et cetera. But this is like a much broader, like biological, paint by numbers, that the prolonged fast extends beyond the 3-day threshold. And what typically happens there is biological remodeling, organs, tissue systems, and this metabolic health state that we have. So what changed at the 72-hour mark? We'll keep it really like overview here, but heart health specifically, and the relevance to cardiovascular disease, was one of the big changes. And one of the proteins they looked at, it's directionally consistent with reduced cardiovascular risk. And there was a big change in this one protein that they looked at. To really just re-anchor to the point that doing this periodically, these extended fasts, has a incredible long-term health benefit.
Oh yeah.
The second category was brain health. They looked at specific proteins that really stood out, and it had to do with one specific protein and its effect on your brain function. So the outcome from the study was plasma levels of brain-specific members of this extracellular matrix, kind of the fluid that your brain bathes in, really kind of shed some light on a new path to help understand the success of kind of old school, ancient type medical practices, where fasting was used as a cure for a lot of disease processes that weren't even named back in the day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
The last one is going to be the autoimmune conditions. They looked specifically at one protein that was linked to rheumatoid arthritis, that if you had this higher levels of this protein, you had an increased risk of having RA and other autoimmune issues, specifically in this case, RA and interleukin-7. At day 3, there was a massive shift. More than 1/3 of the proteins captured, and many of those, map really well to some of these biological pathways. This one here had a massive decrease in this protein, which, if you have high levels, links you to having autoimmune and RA type issues.
Wow.
So,
I mean, it starts to make sense why we hear so much feedback
yeah,
as far as my RA symptoms are decreased now that I'm fasting, or we hear when I'm fasting or when I'm getting into the longer fast, that 30, 40, 50 hour kind of range, I'm feeling this decrease in symptoms. But then at the same time, when I go to break that fast, man, some of those symptoms come rushing back. And so then it becomes, okay, well, what are we doing during our nutrition opportunity window too? And because that's going to affect what's happening with these proteins, as well as potentially symptoms, and then
yep.
long-term trajectories and long-term results.
So does this mean that fasting is 100% effective in treating these diseases? No. Are we doing that with fasting? No. But it does suggest there's a lot more than just putting yourself into an easy way to get into a caloric deficit, right?
Right.
But the cool thing that happened was when they went through this day 8, 9, and 10 refeeding protocol, they were still monitoring these proteins, these proteomes. And some of the alterations in the immune and structural proteins in terms of cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, diabetes, blood sugar, all that kind of stuff, they stayed. So I love Nick's analogy here. He kind of uses like a software update, right? And, once the update installs, it doesn't uninstall just because you restarted the computer. Some of the reboot, some of that reprogramming sticks.
Right.
So I love the framework of doing this a couple times a year because you're going to get the long-term benefits. David Sinclair says the same thing. He does a lot of work in longevity and senescent cells and how your body can regenerate. So it kind of aligns with that same thought, is that there are benefits to doing this periodically to help that system reboot and then start with a new metabolic kind of onboarding system, because you're going to get the benefits. The key thing in the weight category was that the lean mass returned after the refeed period, but the weight loss, the fat mass loss, stayed.
Yeah, that's such an important perspective, because the massive change that can happen on the scale, when you're looking at it, it can feel very exciting. Sometimes it can feel overly exciting during a longer fast, because it's not just fat that's going away. It's potentially a temporary change, rather. It's a temporary change in hydration, but also in intracellular water. And so then going into the fast, understanding that, not getting too attached to that low watermark on the scale that you might see, means that you'll definitely have less disappointment or less frustration coming out of that fast, because a long fast like that is incredible and should not be measured. The success of that fast should not be measured on the scale, because these things that we're talking about here, while they can be measured, they take a very strict, disciplined, rigorous experimental lab kind of procedure in order to measure them. So for you to know as the listener that you are creating this environment, you are reproducing these results within your body, means that you just need to trust the process, that these are the results that you will see within your body, even if you can't see the physical numbers to actually match them up. That's okay.
So this is the distinction point in our recommendation. So inside of coaching and our challenges, we cycle through 24 to 48 hour fat, anywhere from 18 to 36 to 48 hour fasts on a weekly basis, occasionally doing a longer 72 hour fast, right? But that's because most people that come to fasting are trying to lose the weight, right? So yes, we want to stay, because the majority of these amazing proteome changes and these plasma protein changes that we see that tap into the dementia, diabetes, cardiovascular health, immune function, immune response, all of that take place after the 72-hour mark.
Right.
So if your focus is fat loss and weight loss, then we need to be cycling through those shorter fasts in a fasting lifestyle adaptation kind of way, which will get the scale down. Because if you can lose that visceral fat and get rid of that fat mass, that's the biggest lever that you can pull for proper long-term health and metabolic function, right?
Yeah, it's metabolically active when you get rid of it.
Someone to do a week-long fast every month, probably do more harm than good. Not really creating long-term sustainable habits there. Unless you're in the severe obese category, maybe. But once a year, twice a year, absolutely. like
Yeah.
100%. So the study really identified a threshold beyond which many of the more dramatic biological changes begin to emerge. So how do we, air quotes, hack the benefits of this study into more of a fasting lifestyle adaptation on a day-to-day basis? We can use some of this by really diving into the ketone diet and a ketogenic diet, because you're going to still see, by staying in ketosis, because we know that ketosis has therapeutic applications for epilepsy
Hmm.
and patients that have epileptic seizures, as well as chronic migraines, autoimmune issues, MS, Parkinson's. There's been some crazy results that have come out of adopting a ketogenic diet and staying in deep medically guided therapeutic ketosis for those conditions as
Hmm.
a treatment option. Obviously, that goes against standard medical practice, so it's an emerging field. But there were associations between ketone levels and the protein changes that they saw
Yeah.
just in having ketone bodies floating around in your bloodstream, because they
Hmm.
are brain and body protective.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the results in these accelerations and decelerations of proper proteins to get in a better balanced state within the body. A lot of these were significantly associated with and because of the changes in glucose, insulin, and ketones within the body. So that biochemical mix, we can enhance the we can accelerate that process of that biochemical shift. And the way that we do that is by understanding how our food choices, um, how we actually make those food choices and what we prioritize during our nutrition opportunities.
Yep.
So, when we hear, I'm going low carb, or I'm trying to avoid carbs, or I'm going keto, or the only time I see the scale move is when I'm following more of a ketogenic diet, then it's definitely, it's always the shiny object for weight loss, because we know if we're restricting carbs, we're probably going to be eating a bit less. We're probably going to have an easier time controlling blood sugar and controlling insulin. The scale's probably going to move a little bit faster. And
Yep.
so, but at the same time, we've done numerous studies and conversations about the effectiveness and the difficulty.
Long-term sustainability.
Yes, the difficulty in adhering to a very low carb or ketogenic slash carnivore kind of lifestyle.
Yep.
And so when we think through, okay, how do I use it? Can I use this effectively as a tool, understanding that it's probably not the best to just shoot for long term. It just doesn't work out for most people to stick to that long term, and that's okay. We don't have to strive for that. We can use a keto or a very low carb restriction kind of diet. We can use that strategically, 30, 60, 90-day cycles. And when we do that, what we end up doing is we're accelerating the process of, when we go to break our fast, we're essentially pausing the fat loss process. We don't need to tap into long-term fat stores because we just brought in new fuel, right?
Yep.
So if we brought in new fuel, we need to burn through that before we're going to need to go back to the deep freezer in the basement to go grab the long-term fat stores that are visceral fat and deposited all around our body. So understanding that, we're pausing the process. How do we pause the process for less time? Well, we actually we do it by making strategic food choices during our nutrition opportunity. And when we do that, and we're using a ketogenic type of approach, when we do that, we have to switch less into the carbohydrate metabolism, which
Yep.
means we're faster to go back into a state of ketosis. We're keeping ketones higher because blood sugar doesn't rise as much. And when we do that, we're able to keep the biochemistry going that encourages these changes in these
These
proteins.
long-term changes that they
Yes.
saw in the 7-day fast study. You're
So
right.
so
Absolutely.
remember, I alluded to the fact that it was a cliffhanger story, that there were additional changes that could be and are likely going to be happening within these proteins. over time. So if these people had gone to a 10-day fast or a 15-day fast, you probably would have seen that some of these changes would have continued. Does that mean we need to go into a fast that long to see a huge benefit? No, absolutely not. But what it does mean is that each fast and then each food decision or nutrition opportunity, those are all linked together. And so the proteins don't just all go back to baseline, go back to where they were before the fast. They don't just immediately return back to that point.
Right.
Some of these effects are cumulative and additive from one fast to the next, but not when we're fasting sporadically and just
Right.
like a shotgun approach. But when we think about this as fast cycling, like we always talk about, and linking one fast to one meal choice to another fast to another meal, another nutrition opportunity, then we're able to get these additive and cumulative benefits over time.
Yeah. And so you're kind of like doing mini system upgrades to the software analogy earlier.
Yes.
By adopting this ketone production or ketogenic diet lifestyle. Now,
Yeah.
electrolytes is a big part of this as well. So that's why we love a 90-day run of keto. We've done episodes on this. A 90-day run of keto is a great way to reset your system and get some of these benefits of these longer 7-day fasting results with these protein studies like this one. You're going to be able to get some of those benefits and do some of that metabolic rewiring as you go throughout the fasting lifestyle process. So last thing is how to break a fast. We've all done this incorrectly. I did not listen to Tommy the first time I did a 24-hour fast. I opened my window and put all the things that I missed the day before on my 3 meals plus 2 snacks a day plan that I was on. You know, the Costco protein bars and the beef patties and the raw cheese, and I just kept eating, and it did not go well for my digestive system. So practical guidelines for prolonged fasts: start small and simple, because your digestive system has completely downregulated, and your intestinal lining is going to go, stem cell production and remodeling is going to take place, and it takes time for everything to ramp back up. So easy digestible foods in small portions, a few hard-boiled eggs, Greek yogurt, some bone broth, right? Avoid going right into the big salad or roughage, or, you know, smashing, you know, a bag of cashews, healthy fats. You're probably going to have some gastric emptying and having to run to the bathroom. So we don't want you to do that. So start small, then wait a few hours, and don't go to the sweets either. Right? So a large carb load after a long fast is going to flip a switch, and it's just going to start the old pattern back again, and your GI tract will not be happy with you. So personally, I like to break with some of the things we just mentioned. I'll start, I do really great with raw dairy and some simple protein, like a little bit of meat, chicken, fish. I like to eat leftovers, so I'll just break with whatever's in the fridge, give it a couple hours, and then I have a smaller meal, protein-based meal a little bit later, and that typically takes away the gastric volatility piece to incorrectly breaking a long fast.
Yeah, think about your insulin load, because the longer your fast, the lower the insulin went. And so the thing about going to break that longer fast, and the longer the fast it is, the more it matters, is that you will feel that metabolic switch going back over to the carbohydrate metabolism. The more faster acting carbohydrates you bring into that fast break or that next meal, the more you'll feel it, and not in a good way too. And in fact, if you have a larger meal, more carbohydrates, or it might just be your normal meal, depending on how you typically eat, then you could feel that crash. You could feel like a big surge in insulin, because now blood sugar was low, insulin was low, and all of a sudden they both had to go screaming upward. And then all of a sudden you feel this, whoa, this wave kind of hits you. It doesn't feel good, and it's surprising, because you're thinking, well, I normally eat, you know, fairly well, and I'm used to this, but it can be too much for the system at that point, because it's a big metabolic shift. So think about what your metabolism is doing at that point during that longer fast. You're squarely in fat burning mode. So bringing in protein and fats mostly is going to be more aligned with what your body's looking for, and actually in the mode for processing as a fuel source right in there. So let's just stay parallel with that line that your body's already in.
Yeah, we had somebody reach out to us one point as we wrap up today. It was like, hey, why don't you ever talk about all the other benefits of fasting? You talk about weight loss a lot. I'm like, yeah, that's because what most people come to fasting for.
Sure.
But there are so many additional benefits to fasting and so many amazing stories that we've heard.
Oh, yeah.
So I love this study because it really coordinates the biological response that touches the immune system, the brain, the cardiovascular system, and potentially dozens of other processes, right? In studies like this. So I love it. But done safely and sparingly, 7-day fast once or twice a year is going to act like a metabolic reset. As this study showed, the fat loss stays off. It's going to improve your fuel flexibility, quiet inflammation, and touch all of those other systems that we mentioned. But it's not an everyday habit.
Yeah, and the benefits will remain even if the scale is net neutral at the end of the day. Even
you're
if
still getting benefit.
The benefits are additive. You're getting those benefits. So do it even if you're not looking, or even if you're not seeing like net changes on the scale. You are still benefiting from it, and you'll feel those benefits over time.
So fasting forward framework. Take one or two things from this that you can put into your day-to-day life today. But also, you know what? Look at the calendar. When are you going to do it? Get a fasting buddy. Go to the fasting Facebook group. Reach out to us. Join a challenge, right? You don't have to be on Fasting Island alone. But look at the calendar and pick a couple of dates, because if you never do that, it ain't ever going to happen. We all know that's the truth. So,
true story.
Tommy, man, appreciate the conversation as always. Love this article. Love where the science and research is directing us as we continue to adapt our fasting lifestyles. We're on this journey with you. Thank you guys so much for listening in today, Tommy. Appreciate the conversation as always, man, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye. So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.